What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Tuesday, March 16th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 7-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Tomas Satoransky from the Chicago Bulls playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Tomas Satoransky has averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 21 minutes per game with a 15% usage rate. He scored 34, 7, and 12 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 25, 15, and 24 minutes. He's projected at 25 fantasy points here tonight. On FanDuel, that's 6 times value because he's $4,200 FanDuel salary, but he's $600 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. He doesn't need much to hit value on DraftKings. Now, this guy's a hit or miss player, so he's a high risk, high reward play here. Probably a tournament play for me only, but I love that DraftKings price. I think he's got a great chance to hit 5 times value or more. Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game, and he scored 22 and 38 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Thunder. So I like Tomas Satoransky here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, another point guard that I like is Mike Conley from the Utah Jazz playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing point guards. Mike Conley has averaged 31.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 36, 30, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 31, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 32.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $6,500 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game, and he scored 40, 25, 32, and 52 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Celtics. So he got you 5 times value or more, 75% of the time, 3 out of his last 4 games. So I like Mike Conley here versus the Boston Celtics. Okay, another point guard that I like is Ben Simmons from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the New York Knicks, who have a good defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing point guards. Ben Simmons has averaged 40.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 32 fantasy points last game, played 26 minutes with a 23% usage rate. He's projected at 39.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's $8,200 FanDuel salary and $800 more on DraftKings. He scored 41, 47, 35, and 51 fantasy points in the last 4 games versus the New York Knicks. So I like that player versus team history. Now, I like this FanDuel price much more than I like the DraftKings price, but isn't that the case with most of these players? And he did play 26 minutes last game, so he came back from the health and safety protocol. I expect him to return to his full workload here tonight, so I like Ben Simmons here versus the New York Knicks. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Ty Jerome from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Chicago Bulls, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing shooting guards, Ty Jerome has averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. He scored 30, 24, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 28, and 26 minutes. He's projected at 20.7 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.3 times value. He's $3,900 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game. He's been playing awfully well lately, plenty of minutes, good production, and his price is still super low. So I like Ty Jerome here versus the Chicago Bulls. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing shooting guards, but Donovan Mitchell has averaged 39.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate. He scored 26, 50, and 52 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 36, and 42 minutes. He's projected at 41 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's $8,200 FanDuel salary and $700 more on DraftKings. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. And one of the reasons I like this pick is because Donovan Mitchell has scored 61, 19, 49, 50, and 32 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Celtics. So 3 out of his last 5 games, he's absolutely crushed value versus the Celtics. So I like Donovan Mitchell here versus the Boston Celtics. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and then we'll send you $100 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, I got another value play for you. I like Talen Horton-Tucker from the LA Lakers playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Talen Horton-Tucker has averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 18 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 39, 10, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 17, and 19 minutes. Now he's getting some extra run here because of the injury to Alex Caruso, so that's why you see his minutes were bumped up last game, and he did really well. He scored 39 fantasy points. That's amazing production in 28 minutes. So he's projected at 17.8 fantasy points here tonight. But if Alex Caruso misses tonight, which I think he's going to, I would expect him to score 20 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's only $3,700 FanDuel salary, and he's $100 less on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites. Now, he also scored 28 fantasy points in his last game versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 225 points scored in this game. It's a great matchup, so I like Talen Horton-Tucker here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. Okay, so I got a really nice value play on FanDuel. I like Kenyon Martin Jr. from the Houston Rockets playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Kenyon Martin Jr. has averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 16 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 37, 40, and 31 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 30, 28, and 32 minutes. So it looks like the Rockets have found something in Kenyon Martin Jr. He's playing a ton of minutes, amazing production, and he's projected at 25.9 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's 7.4 times value. He's still only 3,500 FanDuel salary. He is 1,800 more on DraftKings. He's playable on DraftKings, but I think he's a smash FanDuel value play. And he scored, he hasn't played the Hawks yet, but it's a fast-paced game and a good matchup. So I like Kenyon Martin Jr. here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, another small forward that I like is Carmelo Anthony from the Portland Trailblazers playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Carmelo Anthony has averaged 24.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 30, 45, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 31, and 22 minutes. He's projected at 25.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 5,300 FanDuel salary and 200 more on DraftKings. He scored 17, 32, 22, 38, and 13 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pelicans. This is a great matchup, a fast-paced game. He's had a really nice game the past 2 games. I think his price is pretty reasonable for his upside and the matchup. So I like Carmelo Anthony here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, another small forward that I like is Danilo Gallinari from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing small forwards. Danilo Gallinari has averaged 20.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 31, 25, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 29, and 29 minutes. Now, he did have a 28% usage rate last game, so that's a signal to me that he may be more involved in the game plan tonight. So he's only projected at 23.5 fantasy points here tonight, which is only 4.2 times value, but I think he can score 27 fantasy points or more in this one and get you 5 times value or more. He's 5,600 FanDuel salary and 300 more on DraftKings. So this is a bit of a risky play here. He's going to be, it's going to be a low ownership play, and he does have 30 plus fantasy point upside, which he's done in the past 4 out of 5 games. So I like Danilo Gallinari here versus the Houston Rockets. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. I like Lauri Markkanen from the Chicago Bulls playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Lauri Markkanen has averaged 29 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 29, 28, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 33, and 27 minutes. He's projected at 29.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 5,500 FanDuel salary and 500 more on DraftKings. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game, and he scored 30, 32, 23, and 27 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Thunder. So he would have got you 5 times value or more in 3 of the last 4 games versus the Thunder. It's a great matchup, a fast-paced game, so I like Lauri Markkanen here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, another power forward that I like is Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics playing the Utah Jazz, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing power forwards. Jason Tatum has averaged 43 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 31% usage rate. He scored 40, 43, and 52 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 28, 35, and 37 minutes. He's projected at 43.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's 8,900 FanDuel salary and 400 more on DraftKings. So I like Jason Tatum here versus the Utah Jazz. Okay, here's another value play for you. I like Nathan Knight from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Nathan Knight scored 37 fantasy points in 22 minutes last game with a 23% usage rate. He's projected at 16 fantasy points here tonight, which on FanDuel is 4.6 times value because he's 3,500 FanDuel salary, but he's 500 less on DraftKings. So you got a minimum salary player who just scored 37 fantasy points last night in a great matchup. So I like Nathan Knight here versus the Houston Rockets. Okay, moving on to the center position. I got another value play for you. I like Moses Brown from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Chicago Bulls, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Moses Brown has scored 24, 25, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 24, 26, and 19 minutes. He's projected at 22.2 fantasy points here tonight, which is 5.3 times value. He's 4,200 FanDuel salary and 700 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. So I like Moses Brown here versus the Chicago Bulls. Okay, another center that I like is Enes Kanter from the Portland Trailblazers playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing centers, Enes Kanter has averaged 30.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 20, 36, and 36 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 26, 31, and 27 minutes. He's projected at 31.7 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's 5.1 times value because he's only 6,200 FanDuel salary, but he is 1,000 more on DraftKings. So probably a FanDuel play for me. And Enes Kanter has scored 17, 45, 27, and 45 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Pelicans. So I like Enes Kanter here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. So I play Enes Kanter on FanDuel, but I'd probably play this guy on DraftKings. I like Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Rudy Gobert has averaged 40.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 77, 47, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 32, and 38 minutes. He's projected at 42.7 fantasy points here tonight, which is 4.9 times value. He's $8,800 FanDuel salary, but he's $600 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. He scored 42, 27, 29, 35, and 44 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Celtics. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. So I know I've given you 3 players from the Utah Jazz: Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, and Rudy Gobert. I probably would play a max of 2 out of those 3 guys, or just pick your favorite. So I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Boston Celtics. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.